Well, welcome to another episode of the Practitioner's Edge, the FICPA's Small Firm Suite podcast. This is Dan Hen, CPA, CTR, and coming to you today with another special guest. I have Dan Giddings with Blue Jay. And for those of you that are familiar with the world of AI, a Blue Jay is one specifically in our space, in the tax/accounting space. And Dan is going to tell us a lot more about that and what it can do and what it would add to your practice. Dan, first, let me welcome you. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Nice to chat with another Dan.
The first question that I ask is, in 60 seconds or less, tell me a little bit about yourself and what's your passion.
That's a great question. It's sort of like that tell me about yourself and that first interview question, right? I guess that's here we are. Born and raised, live just outside of Toronto in Canada. Super passionate about sports outside of work. Love to be active, get outside. Being a typical Canadian, hockey was the main sport growing up and obviously didn't make the NHL. Here we are. And play a lot of golf, and I just love to be outside and when I can in my free time.
The next question is, how would you explain what you do to a CPA if you were meeting them at a networking event in your normal 30, 60-second kind of elevator speech?
At a really simple level, like I help firms evaluate Blue Jay if it's going to be a fit for them in their practice, sort of what they're using today for tax research and how Blue Jay would compare, and then help them with the actual purchasing of Blue Jay. That would be like my role specifically with Blue Jay. But at a high level, right, like Blue Jay is AI specifically for tax research. It is a curated closed loop database of only verified, trusted sources. You can trust the answer that you're going to get is coming from only legitimate sources. It looks and feels a lot like a chat GPT for ease of use, but it is, like I said, only trusted sources. There's that level of comfort with it that it is secure and reputable sources that are licensed, getting you the most up-to-date content.
Super. With the keyword being secure, and we'll
Yeah.
get more into that. I'm sure I will have more because that's always the biggest thing for us as tax professionals. So, what I want to now ask you is, what's the origin story of Blue Jay? And the question that I like to ask is, who got bit by the radioactive spider, that became the superhero that created Blue Jay? As far as the history and origins, obviously it couldn't have been that long ago, since AI, as we know it, has been only around for a little over 3 years, which is hard, still mind-boggling to think that of how far it's come. Tell us a little bit more about that origin story.
I kind of get this question alongside of like Blue Jay must be named after the Toronto Blue Jays because of the Canadian aspect, but Blue Jay was actually founded by a law professor at the University of Toronto. About 11 years ago is when the company started, and we started in the legal space. And then about 3-ish years ago, kind of like you just mentioned, Dan, when AI really started to take off with some sophistication around the large language models, we pivoted from the legal space and now we're exclusively in tax and tax only. Maybe I'll touch on the Blue Jay name there just for a second. Again, I mentioned the University of Toronto. Their sports team name at the University of Toronto is called the Varsity Blues. That's the beginning part of it. And then the J is for the JD in the legal acronym. It's just the letter J. It's not Jay like the Toronto Blue Jays. But that is a nice segue to then talk about the Blue Jays when we're having some of these Blue Jay conversations.
Well, that's a cool origin story. That's, I mean, I would, knowing in Toronto, knowing the Blue Jays, that would make logical sense, but to hear the actual origin story is even better. Tell me, Dan, what's the mission vision of Blue Jay the company and Blue Jay the product?
Great questions. The company itself, the mission would be to provide absolute clarity when it comes to tax. And I guess if you can then sort of boil that down to the product itself, is we are set out to make the easiest to use tax research solution out there on the market.
When you work with small accounting firms specifically, what are the most common challenges you see them have right now?
I would say the most common challenge is not enough resources to keep up with increasing workload and expectations from clients. I hear multiple stories of, oh, my client ran this in ChatGPT and is telling me what the answer is. And obviously, we know the tax landscape is ever changing and it's never the same as the previous year. A lot of small firms are struggling to keep up with the ever changing landscape, the resources, the legislation, and honestly, bringing in new junior folks into the firm as well. We're hearing that a little bit. And oftentimes, research falls onto one or two specific people at the firm. If we can provide the entire firm with an extremely easy to use tool to help with the research, it can take a lot of the research off of the managing partner or the heavy researchers to free up their time as well. And for those sort of quick client questions, you can easily run them within BlueJ, verify the sources, and then maybe it's just a quick approval from the manager or the managing partner, and then quick recap of the email, and then send it back to the client super quick. But just equipping the whole firm to be able to answer tax questions and not one specific person.
Let's take a step back here for a second. And why don't you give me a brief example of what a tax professional or would use BlueJ for? And then add on to that, what is the biggest misconception that people have about BlueJ that you want to help clarify?
The first part about what you would use BlueJ for is anything tax research related. It can be a super generic question. It can be a very specific and pointed and detailed question. It could be a multi-state question. You could throw in a client scenario in terms of their tax situation. You could put in their net worth, their income for the year, their capital gains, et cetera, et cetera. You can get really as detailed as you like with it and get it to sort of advise you on what you're looking at in terms of a situation, and then provide you with the supplementary sources to then back up your decision or your research. And then much like ChatGPT, right, it is extremely easy to use. Then you can ask follow-up questions and dig deeper into the research as well. You could start with a super generic question, like tell me about sales tax in Georgia. And then you could then ask a follow-up question being like digging deeper into that specific situation. And all your research within that same topic is going to be stored within much like a ChatGPT like thread, where the question above is going to be taken into consideration when you ask that follow-up question as well. You don't need to repeat it or place set it or anything like that. We'll kind of get into this, I think, maybe a little bit also as well, but you can upload a tax return, a partnership agreement, or even like an operating agreement into BlueJ as well, and ask it to analyze it for you, give you 3 tax strategies based on the attached return from the previous year, or even give me the 2 differences between these 2 agreements. And it's a secure environment, kind of like we touched on at the beginning here, where that document is automatically deleted out of BlueJ after 24 hours, but it's just helping firms provide that extra layer of personalization and that efficiency as well. And then I guess further from that, you can then turn the research that you've just done, maybe a couple questions, into a really concise email for the client. You could turn it into a research memo, PowerPoint slide. You can do engagement letters, cover letters, LinkedIn posts. I've even had a firm ask BlueJ to sort of develop them a hiring plan for hiring a new CPA. The possibilities are pretty endless, to be honest. And you could say, craft me an email that's max 400 words and as if I'm speaking to a 6th grader to send it to my client. And it would do that for you as well. And then I'll pivot to the second question here. The biggest misconception, I would say, is that something like a ChatGPT or a Copilot, those generic sort of AI tools, are sufficient for tax research. And while those tools will give you a quick answer, sometimes I will say they can be right. Sometimes they are pulling from the entire internet. They are pulling from sources like Wikipedia and Reddit and Dan's tax blog, or out-of-date court cases, for example, and that can be a huge red flag and a costly mistake when it comes to tax research as well. And we've all heard ChatGPT making up the fake court cases as well. Just be careful with those. Of like, while you think those are giving you an appropriate answer, you have to be very careful with the source material that it is pulling from. Big difference between them and BlueJ.
Let me ask you a couple of follow-up questions there because the two things you kind of touched on, and if you could expand on it a little bit more, is the security. And the other aspect is the accuracy because
Yep.
I'm big into AI. I'm using a lot of different AI tools, and I've been with ChatGPT, with Claude, with a bunch of others, and I've asked it some questions and gotten some good sites, but it wasn't like a full complete site, or it wasn't totally accurate. There's one particular site that I use it's actually been very factual. I know it can be done. I mean, it's giving me the sites, the links, and court cases that it's doing well. But the extra piece that you guys add is you've got it all in a self-contained piece because the other site that I have, they can't obviously give me the kind of security that you were just talking about. From the perspective of security, you mentioned about the files deleting. Do I have to redact these files? Another service that I've seen, when you upload it, they automatically redact it in the database there, but you guys actually delete it. Do I need to do that? And can I be safe that if I put my client's name or whatever into the chat string, is that going to be an issue? And then from the accuracy perspective, what is the base of the knowledge that BlueJ has? Does it have the code? Does it have regulations, all the court cases? You mentioned some state related stuff. How detailed and deep does it go?
We'll touch on the security part first. Right off the hop, BlueJ is SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, and we take security very seriously. You do not need to redact any information when you put a return or an agreement or anything like that into BlueJ. You can if you'd like to, but you do not need to, because the BlueJ does not take that information and it does not train any sort of large language model. BlueJ does not learn from your question. I kind of frame it to folks like a one-way street versus a two-way street. The free version of ChatGPT is learning from your question and training the overarching model. That is not the case with BlueJ. We do not learn from your question. It's just designed to get you the answer that you're looking for based on source material. And specifically with the file upload, that was probably the most asked feature that we had last year, and it came out around Halloween last year, end of October. You can load in those different documents. That could be any PDF, Word, Excel, JPEG, PNG file. You can also do multiple files at the same time. Again, not training any sort of model that you put into when you put that document into BlueJ. Run your question. BlueJ will give you the response. You'd have that thread of the response, much like a ChatGPT response. And then the document itself that you've uploaded is then automatically deleted out of BlueJ after 24 hours. We do that for security purposes, that the document itself is no longer accessible. You will still be able to see the thread with the response that you've gotten from that question, but the document itself is long gone. You can also delete the document right after the question is done loading. You can, or you can just wait and we'll automatically do it 24 hours. And then if you have a follow-up question about that document, just re-upload the document there. No worries there. And then also, I guess one other thing on the security front is the questions that you ask within your BlueJ account are private to you and you only. You are the only one that can see the answers that are coming from that question. So if you're a manager, for example, your juniors cannot see the questions that you're asking within your account, not even me as a BlueJ employee. They are truly private to you and you only. Again, another reason why you can put in client names, client scenarios, actual calculations within the tool. I'll touch over to the accuracy now. We really take people's feedback seriously when it comes to the accuracy of the question, and ultimately that is what matters most is accuracy of answer, right? To get people the right answer.
Right.
We have a less than a 0.2% disagree rate on the responses coming out of BlueJ. You can either give the response a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and that's how we track that metric there. If you disagree with the response, you can give it a thumbs down, provide it a little bit of context as to why you feel the answer was incorrect. That goes straight to my legal research team. They can review the question. Less than a 0.2% disagree rate, because again, we are only pulling from trusted sourced material. That's licensed content. Some of it's directly from the IRS. We license that content. Other content within BlueJ is stats, regulations, case law, private letter rulings, OECD information. We now license IBFD content, tax notes. Again, legit information. Again, that closed loop database as well. I have an in-house team of CPAs that their sole job is to maintain and update that database with the most relevant legislation and information. All information has to be approved and vetted by them to make it into BlueJ. That's where, unfortunately, Dan's tax blog doesn't make the cut. And then any out-of-date legislation as well is going to be removed by them as well. Happy to walk anyone through our source material as well at any point. Happy to do that in follow-up conversations.
And you mentioned earlier using Georgia sales tax. Do you cover all the 50 states? Are there any other countries on top of that? What's the depth of the knowledge?
Thanks for the follow-up question there. All 50 states are covered within BlueJ. There is no extra database that you need to subscribe to or no extra module or anything like that. All 50 states are included. That's full SALT coverage for all 50 states. Some international content as well, for sure. And we actually just are rolling out our IBFD content. We announced a partnership with them back in the fall where we are leveraging IBFD content for better international content coming into BlueJ as well, which is really going to help our international content. That's exciting. And property tax, sales tax, income tax, all areas are covered within BlueJ.
Being that you do these demos with people, can you give me a practical example or success story on a firm or two that used the BlueJ tool and how it worked out for them? What end result did they get, and was it what they were looking for?
For sure. I actually had one firm yesterday that just wrapped up their trial with me, and they are going to be moving forward with BlueJ. But the client had asked them 4 questions that the client had also ran themselves through ChatGPT. And the partner ran all 4 questions through BlueJ, asked a couple follow-up questions, and then turned that thread of research and responses to those questions into a really concise email that he was able to then send back to the client. He told me yesterday that whole process of 4 questions, couple follow-ups, and crafting that email within BlueJ took less than 10 minutes. And I asked him how long that would have taken him if not for using BlueJ, and he said the better part of an hour. Even there, you've saved 50 minutes on one client's 4 questions that if you chunk those up over the course of the week, it's saving users hours per week in terms of responses. And that might even be on the simple end of the research questions that then you have to draft the email or draft the memo, saving people a ton of time, and just like a super practical example, especially this time of year. And then the other one was at a firm, I guess in the Seattle area, that was struggling with juniors creating memos, and it was just taking them way too long. And their whole firm actually adopted BlueJ, and now juniors are crafting memos within minutes and a much faster and a quicker approval process from managers, being able to use a tool like BlueJ because of that trusted database and that closed loop environment. They signed up with us in the fall, and they've now asked north of 1,700 questions and counting within BlueJ.
Here's the practical example that I would see that for me, being I've had 30 years of experience preparing tax returns in various firms, and 16 of that was on my own. So the thing I would want to find out is, because I look at like 3 scenarios, because the hardest part that we have as tax professionals is our clients expect us to be proactive. But unfortunately, because we are overwhelmed with the work, with everything else going on in our lives, with dealing with staff, dealing with clients, that we just don't have the time to be the proactive person. So the thing to me would be, I prepare the tax return, and then could I upload the tax return? Could I upload my documents and say, hey, is this tax return fairly prepared correctly? That's kind of like the first question. Then the second question, is there anything that I missed that could be questions that I asked the client but that maybe never have been asked before? And then thirdly, I then take that same information and say, now, knowing what we know about this client, could we make any future tax planning suggestions? Are those three different things that we could do and apply in BlueJ?
Absolutely. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there, right? It's being able to trust a tool that you can challenge it as well, because that it's going to give you a legitimate answer. A fully fair question is, what else am I not thinking about? Or how might the client respond? Or how might the IRS respond? Give me an out of the box alternative solution. Like, you can literally probe BlueJ for anything that you want. And again, because it's a trusted sourced list of material that we're pulling from, if we can't find source material to back up the answer, we are going to be honest with folks and say, I don't know. It happens pretty few and far between, because most people are staying within the tax realm within BlueJ. But different from a chat GPT is you can't bend it or tweak it or get it to give you the answer that you want it to give you, because it has to be based on source material. Again, kind of going back to that one-way street that I mentioned off the hop. Totally what you had said, filling in the return, double checking your work, maybe probing it. Did I think about this correctly? Or even, did I fill out this form correctly? Or give me a line by line breakdown of how to fill out a certain form. Absolutely. And then what we're seeing a lot of firms who've leveraged BlueJ is getting them that time back of that 2 to 4 hours per week minimum is turning more towards advisory, which is much higher margins, and it's better service for your clients, because you've got that time freed up that now you're offering them even more personalized service, and you're thinking ahead, which is going to make them stay with you for a lot longer as well.
Yeah, that's what the clients are paying us for. Just from the perspective of, as a firm person, I put the return, I put the documents up. It can kind of give me a sort of QC check just to make sure I'm doing it correctly. Being a little proactive to see if there's any opportunity to save the client a few bucks or two. And then obviously being proactive. And if you're doing this all at the same time, you could actually have your client meeting, delivering the return. And oh, by the way, here are some things that we found that we could look at implementing. And then obviously that, like you said, being a higher value client advisory service that we could provide, that many of us aren't, we just don't have the time. But if you're saving the time in helping get these answers and knowing that you're putting together a better product, I think using a tool like BlueJ is definitely a necessity. Let me get to the next question here for you. What's one resource, tip, or best practice you wish every small firm knew?
Leveraging AI, I think, in the right way, I think can actually help you, like all the reasons we've talked about, right? Be more efficient, better service. Maybe you just want to work less. I've had also people tell me that, of like, hey, I just want to work a bit less. Coming towards retirement, and I want to work a little bit less. Using it in the right way, right? It has to be secure. It has to be legit, and even some trusted logos that are using it as well.
I've been finding from my members that many people are finding that they're not using AI because they're scared of it, because they don't know how to use it. I've been fairly technical as a CPA, and in a different life, I'd probably be a computer programmer or something of that nature. But it's just interesting how many firms don't use this. So the next question that I want to ask you, what's a mistake you see experienced practitioners make in this area that's costing them real time or money?
Yeah, I think when we are talking with firms, there's a bit of a, let's say, misconception. We're going to get one BlueJ license for the heavy researcher. And it's like, that's great. That person certainly needs some time back in their day because of probably all the research questions that they're getting bombarded with throughout the day and throughout the year. But actually, where we see the greater success and the greater efficiency is when you roll BlueJ out to everyone who could possibly do some form of tax research. And that's juniors included as well. I spoke with some firms that are like, oh, I need to give it to managers above because juniors need to learn the hard way, as I did back in the day. I totally get where you're coming from. I totally get it. But that's not the way they learn now. And a junior is going to be hard pressed to look through a book and find the answer it's just a very different world compared to what that was now. And a junior is using ChatGPT or Copilot or all these other tools in their day-to-day life. It's not like there's an implementation curve for them to learn how to use something like BlueJ. But if you give them the safe environment of a tax specific tool that is extremely easy to use, they're going to actually level up faster because you're all then using the same program, the same trusted sources, and they're going to be able to arrive at the answer quicker and challenge their answer as well, that they can grow in their career and become a senior and a manager, and you can put more and more of their workload onto them. I would say that's something that I've had to sort of help firms understand, is it doesn't have to just be the managers and the partners. And if you really want those big efficiency gains and to sort of grow your people that you're trying to nurture and grow within their careers, you got to equip them with the tools that they're actually using.
Well, when it comes back to the saving the time and possibly even money perspective, I think you nailed it there, because when I tell people, I've always had this attitude with my staff: don't come to me with a question, come to me with an answer or
Yep.
two or three or what you think it is. And then from there I can help them learn. And I think with a tool like BlueJ, that if they could go and post that question in there, they may already have their answer and then be able to get the answer and maybe not even bother the manager or partner. As the open door policy is great, but a lot of those interruptions throughout the day, that's what hurts our production and then therefore costs a lot of time. And not to mention having the time to explain and do things. If you've got a tool that can do it for you, then why not take advantage of it? I totally agree and believe that everybody, I'd probably even go as far as even the admin person, could have use for using BlueJ to a certain degree, even if it's just creating some of those sixth grade level reading emails that they need to get to clients and triage some of the basic things, document gathering and those types of things. I think that's great. Let me ask you this then: what's the best way for somebody listening to reach you, and what could they expect when they reach out to you and your team?
Yeah, I think the easiest way would just be to request a demo through the bluej.com website. That's going to allow you to book a time that works best for you and your team. I know right now is quite busy, but a demo is going to get you a personalized walkthrough of BlueJ based on your firm and the tools you're currently using and how BlueJ compares to those tools. That would be the easiest way. Alternatively, you can also go to BlueJ and start a 7-day trial, where there's just putting in your email address gets you access to the tool for 7 days. There's no limitations on that. And you can poke around and ask a bunch of questions and challenge it and push it to its limits and see how that goes. And then you can always contact us from there. Two avenues there.
Okay, and again, that's BlueJ, BLUEJ, the letter J.com.
Correct.
What's one thing that you would want listeners to remember from this conversation? What's the one thing that you want them to know?
I think just knowing that BlueJ is extremely easy to use. That's what we've set out to make is a program that like literally anyone on your team can log into and figure out how to use BlueJ instantly without any hand holding or training. It's safe, it's secure, and we are always looking to make it better with innovations and improvements in content. And we have over 5,000 firms using BlueJ now and counting very quickly.
Do you guys offer some kind of training? Are there training modules or and support that they could get if they do get stuck or not sure how to use something?
Absolutely. We have a full support team. Within the tool itself, there's a help center that has on-demand training content, prompting tips and tricks as well. And we have a full dedicated customer success team as well for multiple resources to help folks.
Great. Now, the one question that I like to ask at the end here is, what's a book, podcast, or other resource that's had a real impact on the way you think or do things in your work?
That's a good question. Start with why. I feel like I read that last year. That was on my list of just like challenging what you're using currently. It is obviously tied to leadership there, but for me, it was sort of challenging the status quo and could things be better and always just looking to improve and innovate.
The book Start With Why by Simon Sinek is definitely a very good book, and I would definitely second that in terms of practitioners seeing that book. With that, do you have any other final comments, Dan?
No, I really appreciate you having me on. It's been a great conversation.
Well, Dan, thank you for being here and taking the time to be with us today. All of the information that you want to find out about Blue Jay should be below in the show notes. And I want to thank you guys for being here, listening to the show today, and look for some great guests that we're going to have coming forward in the future. This is Dan Henn, CPA, CTR, signing off for the Practitioner's Edge, the FICPA Small Firm Suite podcast. Have a great day.